What's up, everyone? James Wan's newest horror movie, Malignant, just released in theaters and on HBO Max, so let's review it. Real quick before jumping into the video, if you enjoyed, don't forget to like and subscribe, and leave a comment down below telling me what you thought of Malignant if you have had a chance to see it. This will also be spoiler free, so if you haven't seen the movie, you're free to watch this video, and without further ado, let's get right into it. So I was anticipating this movie very much this year because James Wan is probably my favorite horror director. Because he has directed so many horror movies that I just absolutely love, from Saw to the Conjuring movies. Those are some of my favorite horror movies ever. And even like Insidious and Dead Silence, those are really good movies that I really enjoy. So I was super excited to check this movie out because, like I said, it was nice to see him returning to horror movies, as two of his last three movies have not been horror movies. So it was nice to see him returning to the genre that, kind of really kicked off his career, and that, he's been so good in. So I was really excited for this movie. And this movie follows Emily, played by Annabelle Wallis, who, if you don't know, she was in the first Annabelle movie. She was the main character in that, so you can kind of see the James Wan tie there. But it stars her as she starts to experience like random, like weird events, and she kind of starts having these visions. And that's about as much as I can give away with the plot, because it's like, there's a lot to spoil here. There's a lot of, the movie really evolves a lot, much like a kind of crime thriller, where there's just things keep happening that really change the whole dynamic of the plot. I don't want to spoil any of that. My experience watching this film was really good because, like I said, you just really don't know what's coming next. It works like a crime thriller while still being a horror film. But like I said, I absolutely loved this movie. From start to finish, I'm just absolutely intrigued by what's going on the screen. It starts off, like I said, with Emily, and she's really, these weird things are happening in her life, and you really kind of, things feel very weird, and things feel like something's up. And the movie evolves a lot beyond that point, and it just gets really, by the end of the movie, your jaw's on the floor, because it's just, there's a lot of shocks and twists in this movie that will really kind of just get to you, and at least that was my experience watching this film. Perhaps the biggest strength of this movie is going to be James Wan's directing, particularly with his camera work, which is really nice. As always, he does these kind of like long panning shots around things that look really cool. It's almost like, in a way, it's a lot like some of the stuff Stanley Kubrick did with like The Shining. It's similar to that, but if you've seen like The Conjuring, obviously But it's like these long still shots that look really awesome. And it's just really like just very visually pleasing to see, as well as James Wan's tone building and world build and tone and setting and everything in this movie. From the well-used music in this film, that's very kind of sets the tone of this movie. It's very creepy, but it's also very intriguing what's going on. You can't look away because it's just, you're really invested in what's happening, because James Wan does a nice job in the first 30 minutes at setting everything up. And like, the tone and the tension just keep building throughout the entire film, as this movie very much is a kind of like progressive, as it just gets more and more and more kind of intense as the movie goes on. Much like a crime thriller should, this feels very much like a crime thriller, but just a horror movie, with horror elements. So I thought it really worked for me. I think this movie plays a lot with the horror tropes. Going into it, I expected this to be a supernatural horror film, and while it is at times, it's much more than that. It really, on my first viewing, I don't really know what's happening. I don't really know what's going on. I say go into this movie with as little information as you can, because it's just, nothing should be spoiled for you, because there's just a lot that happens in this film that really will just, blow your mind. And I think that was a really good nod to James Wan, as he did such an excellent job directing this movie and just really keeping the viewer invested in the movie. There's a twist in this movie. I'm not going to spoil it, obviously. Well, there's a number of twists, but just really, that just will absolutely blow your mind in this film. At least it did for me. And I think the final act of this movie was easily the best act of the film. It was just really, if you're a horror fan, you're going to love the entire final act. It's awesome. Another aspect of this movie that really works is going to be the acting. Annabelle Wallis is great in the lead role, and all the characters in this movie just work very well. And Malignant is just a very original horror movie from 2021. It's possibly my favorite horror movie of the year. Maybe not quite up to Quiet Place Part 2, but I really enjoyed this movie. And it's just really, like, it goes really to all lengths to please the audience. James Wan is no stranger when it comes to directing horror, and this movie is, for me, it just worked. It's definitely not his best movie. If I was to rank him, it would probably rank around the middle of his movies. But overall, it just, it absolutely worked for me in pretty much all regards. I left this movie with a smile on my face thinking, that was amazing. That's the kind of movie I want to watch. I love horror, and this movie just was everything I wanted. I love how James Wan blends horror genres in this movie. Really, I don't really know what to classify it as. There's a lot of different elements in this. It's definitely has a lot of crime thriller elements from something like Seven, maybe, would be a decent comparison. It's just, this movie really worked for me. I highly recommend you check out Malignant, especially if you're into horror. There's a lot of kind of bloody moments that definitely make it an R-rated movie. So obviously, if you're not into that kind of stuff, then this movie probably isn't going to be for you. But if you're into horror and you're like James Wan, I definitely recommend this movie. I had an awesome time with it. I was just, I left the movie with a smile on my face. It's definitely not his scariest movie he's ever made. It's definitely not his best horror movie he's ever made. But in terms of just originality and just kind of how these ideas got put onto the screen, I think this is one of his best movies, because it's just, this concept on paper is very weird that this movie goes for, but it works so well, and James Wan just does such a good job while adding his style to the movie to just making an excellent horror film. So I'm going to give Malignant a 4 out of 5 and an 86%. Like I said, it's one of my favorite movies of the year so far. I just had a really good time with it. I do think it was a little slow towards the middle of the movie. It just kind of dragged a little bit, but that wasn't a huge issue for me. I really enjoyed it. I was so glad to get a chance to see this movie this year. So anyways, guys, that's going to do it for my review for Malignant. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and tell me down below what you thought of Malignant. I'm definitely curious to see what people have been thinking about the movie. On Letterboxd, I've seen very different reviews, from very high to, mediocre to low reviews of the movie. So I'm very curious to see what everyone else thinks about it. I knew I was going to like this movie because I love James Wan. I love his style. I love his horror movies. I love pretty much everything he does. So I was pretty much knew I was going to like this movie going into it. But nonetheless, as always, thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.